if you look over the history of why the pensions even exist, it existed because there was a problem with the American workers. You know what was happening, Mr. Chair? What was happening, because they didn't have a pension, they had to work till they're 70 and 80 years old. There was no way for them to retire. Nothing. And that is essentially what you're doing with this bill today. You're telling the workers who come to work for government that you're never going to retire from this system. Today, right now, with this system, you're telling the government workers that have been employed here that after 25 years of working the streets, you know, I-4 and I-95 and I-10, and their counties, you're telling them after 25 years of special risk that you can retire and you can leave this place with dignity. You're telling those government workers after 30 years of receiving low pay that you can retire finally with something that you worked for. And so now you're going to take that incentive away, and folks are not going to risk their lives for nothing. And there is no reason for doing this. If you listen to all of those speakers, I agree with every last one of them. When this pension was overfunded, they took the $1.2 billion, not to pay down the unfunded actuarial liability. No, they didn't do that. They did something different. When they had an opportunity to do it, they didn't do it. If you look over the last 3 years, and when we had this as a workshop, Mr. Chair, I asked staff specifically, did we pay the actuarial liability funded amount over the last 3 years? And he said no. And each year it was roughly about $400 million over the last 3 years. So I said, well, wouldn't that equate to roughly about $1.2 billion? Yes. And I said, if you use that money to pay down the unfunded actuarial liability, wouldn't that mean that we would have a more stronger pension today? We would probably be up around 90%. And he said yes. Then I asked him, what happened to the 3%? Well, was that money used to pay down the unfunded actuarial liability? And he said no. Now, what I'm suggesting to you is that's $400 million that's being taken away from government workers today. And it's not used to pay down the unfunded actuarial liability. You're not using that money to strengthen their own pension fund. You're using it to pay bills, which is wrong. Now, in spite of all of these different things, everything that you've done, the fund is still strong. You haven't made the payments. You had opportunities to pay it down, and you never did. It survived a tough market in the mid-2000s, from 9/11 to roughly 2007. It survived that tough and difficult market. And yet it's still almost 88% funded, in spite of all of the things that you tried to do to wreck this pension fund. It is still one of the best funds in the country. And so, Mr. Chair, I really don't understand logically how Chair Broder can say that the state would be on the hook for $500 million for the next 28 years, when there's never been a fixed amount ever associated when an actuary comes and says, here's what you have to pay. It's never been a fixed amount. It always varied based on the market, based on people getting raises, based on people leaving employment, based on disabilities. There are so many characteristics that go in an actuarial report. So it's never going to be a fixed amount. Never. So for him to say, oh yes, the state of Florida is going to be on the hook for $500 million for the next 28 years to try to scare the taxpayers into thinking that this pension fund is a luxury to the government workers, it's too costly for our taxpayers, and that we should do something about it. Well, I tell you, Mr. Chair, I'm standing today with our government workers, and I'm standing today because this is a bad idea. Thank you.